Hey, good evening, everybody. Major General Greg Knight, Vermont's Adjutant General. Thanks for making time and joining us for tonight's Facebook Live Town Hall. Obviously, we'd like to do this in person. That was the original intent, and then, of course, COVID derailed everything. So I'm joined tonight by Brigadier General Dave Manfredi, who's the Director of our Joint Staff, and Colonel Cesar Shevchik, who's our Wing Commander. Thank you both for making time. Again, we look forward, once we're on the backside of COVID, getting together and actually getting around the state and doing these types of events in person. So thank you again for joining us. So Colonel Shevchik will share some updates about F-35 conversion and how that's moving along, and then General Manfredi will talk a little bit about our ongoing COVID response and the ongoing mobilizations that we've got with the Army National Guard. And this evening, you'll note, we're not wearing masks. We are all vaccinated, fully vaccinated. So nice for a change to be able to talk to you without a mask on. So before I go into anything, I want to take a moment to speak about the abhorrent actions that were described in the 7 Days article from yesterday. I'm going to go to my notes here, so bear with me. The actions described have no place in the Vermont National Guard or in our military. Anybody who chooses to behave in such a way, they don't deserve to be in uniform. I'll do everything in my authority to ensure that when I have the information of such behavior, that I'll take the strongest and most appropriate action I am able within the constraints of regulation and law. Let's talk a little bit about constraints. So we have due process, and that's a legal constraint, but it's an important one. It's there for a reason. It increases the time it takes to discipline a bad actor, but it also protects good soldiers and airmen from being disciplined on a whim, without firm legal grounds or based on incomplete information, for instance. It can take 6 months to a year to separate somebody from the military, or in this case from the Vermont National Guard, who's convicted of a crime. So the article mentions that a soldier was convicted about 6 months ago of a misdemeanor charge that did not result in any jail time. Well, we're aware of it, and we have processes to address situations like this, but those processes do take time. That's not something that I can help. That brings me to another point. I want to be very clear about this. The Vermont National Guard, members of the Vermont National Guard, should not receive preferential treatment. Their military service doesn't excuse bad behavior. In fact, we should be held to a higher standard. The American people, Vermonters, you entrust us with a tremendous responsibility. And each one of us needs to live up to that. But we're improving our ability to identify when members choose to engage in criminal activity. I can only address what I know. So last year, I worked with the legislature to create the provost marshal position. And they just started about 3 weeks ago. And what that will do is what we identified is that helps to bridge a gap between civil law enforcement and the National Guard. So there's a disconnect between the civilian and our military systems. So my first task to them was to do a thorough scrub of our criminal records systems. And the intent of that is to find any other bad actors that we have that we may not know about. Even though we as an organization, and it's also DoD policy, when a member is arrested or charged with a crime, we have a duty to report. It doesn't always happen. Now, even though we have other mechanisms in place, periodic background checks for security clearances, things like that, sometimes we don't catch everything. So the Provost Marshal team will engage in that in the near term. In addition, I'm reaching out to the Vermont Chiefs of Police Association and the Attorney General, and I've asked them to ensure that during a processing for somebody who's been arrested or charged, that they ask the question, are you currently serving in the Vermont National Guard? If that is in fact true, that should prompt a conversation, an email, a phone call to the Provost Marshal team, which will expedite us having the information, flagging the individual, which is our term for not permitting any favorable actions to take place, and start the administrative process at our end. One other area that I've found that we're deficient, we have to hold our members accountable for all levels of offensive, but to do that, I have to equip our command teams with the education and tools to do it. So this spring, we're launching our regular professional development sessions, and that's designed to empower our commanders to uphold good standard and discipline in their units. It's holding members appropriately accountable when necessary, and that's through our non-judicial punishment, which is our military disciplinary process. And that will serve as a deterrent from others from making harmful decisions. So as I said earlier, these described actions by one of our members, it's repulsive. An organization of about 3,200 people, I know the vast majority are living up to and exceeding the standards that we've set for them. But I want everybody to know that I believe and I hear those who've had the courage to share their stories. So I met with one of those folks recently, and I will continue to offer my support to her and anybody who needs to share. And when I'm given information, you'll be heard. So knowing this, I know that it's a challenge to come forward sometimes. These are tough conversations to have. These are tough decisions to make. If somebody has bad information or information that somebody is doing something criminal or acting contrary to our standards, it's hard to come forward. Sometimes it's a fear of retribution. Sometimes there's a fear of bodily harm. It's a very challenging situation to be in. So knowing this, and this was not in the article, the Army and Air National Guard have implemented apps. And in those apps, and they're on the App Store, there's a tile. And that tile is called Reach Up. And anybody can use that tile to send information to the Inspector General, the State Equal Employment Manager, Equal Opportunity Officer, Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, the Provost Marshal team, or me. And they can do that anonymously. They can certainly share their contact information if they like. That's important for me, so I can take action where needed, and I can address those issues more immediately if I have the information. And again, those are not just limited for military use. Certainly we use them as an internal communications mechanism to more effectively and immediately communicate throughout our organization. But again, it's in the App Store. So if anybody out there understands what I'm looking for here, if we have members acting aberrantly in this organization, if there's criminal activity and you know, and you want to come forward, use the app. So anyway, I'm sure we'll have questions here in a moment. I don't want to talk too long, but Colonel Chevchik, thank you again for joining us. If you want to provide us a quick F-35 update, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. I'd be happy to. Thanks for this opportunity, and good evening, everybody. We're about 9 months remaining in our F-35 conversion status. So as we've mentioned before, we have until the end of this calendar year to be a ready F-35 fighter wing. I'm glad to report we remain on track and on timeline, despite the challenges that I think everybody has obviously had with COVID and dealing with that environment. We've been able to execute training even out of state and test people before, after, and reintegrate them back with the communities safely, responsibly, prudently. So very, very proud of the efforts of all. We're also continuing to serve on the many state mission needs that the state has had, to include our COVID mapping, our strategic national stockpile, delivering meals, producing test kits, which were up around 175,000. And now, most recently, starting with the surveillance and vaccination efforts with our team members as well. Finally, we also have our team members that are actually deployed. So we actually have members deployed to Africa, Southwest Asia, and Europe. So the team is actually meeting all our federal and state mission requirements and doing an exceptional job. One thing to highlight is that while doing all this, our team continues to be recognized at the national level. And I want to go ahead and commend the team. Most recently, on some of their awards, as an example, is our public affairs team was recognized in multiple categories as the best in the Air National Guard, which is a testament to them, something they should be extremely proud of. We're proud of them, and obviously that's how they help engage with our community members and our neighbors and citizens. Also, our Priority 1 Task Force, charged with generating growth, they were recognized with the Diversity and Inclusion Team Award, so another significant accomplishment. And that was a joint award. And then most recently, a couple days ago, one of our members was recognized for the NAACP Roy Wilkins Service Award for all of his efforts in making sure that we are a diverse, inclusive organization. And then lastly, I just want to highlight speaking of our public affairs team, as many of you know, our Air National Guard, the fire department, emergency response in the airport, they're the sole responders. to the airport. And just yesterday, there was a press release about how they responded within a minute to an airplane that was on fire on the runway. So they respond as needed at the Burlington National Airport. They are the sole response, fire response, and they do that also within a 15-mile radius. And they are busy throughout the week. So tremendous.
How many times a year does the Air National Guard Fire Department respond to mutual aid?
I would say it ends up being about a couple times a week, sir. So you're up in the probably close to 100 times they're dispatched. And then significantly, just like the one yesterday, right with a burning aircraft, they responded within 1 minute, which is amazing and testament to them and saves lives.
Outstanding.
So thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, Caesar. So, General Freddie, give us a quick update on what's going on with the Vermont Army National Guard.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Good evening, everyone. As we've talked about in previous town halls, we have approximately 1,000 soldiers, pardon me, dropped my phone, heading out the door to different combatant commands across the globe. And about half of those soldiers have deployed as of this point in time. We have a small unit that's over in U.S. European Command, assuming their mission. We have a larger unit in U.S. CENTCOM who is deployed and this month has assumed their security mission over there as well. We have about 100 plus soldiers who are down at Fort Bliss, Texas. They're in the mobilization process and will head over to U.S. AFRICOM here very shortly to continue their mission. The second half of our personnel will mobilize between the end of this month and into June. The Bravo 1st and 101st Field Artillery is scheduled to deploy at the end of this month, and they'll head over to the U.S. CENTCOM area of operation with about 60 soldiers. Our headquarters and headquarters company of the 86th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, 1st and 172nd Cav, and our Public Affairs Detachment all will be heading over to U.S. European Command in May and June. And that will conclude all of our mobilizations at that point in time. And as I said, we'll have about 1,000 personnel spread across 3 different global combatant commands supporting our global operations with the Department of Defense. A quick COVID update. As Colonel Shevchuk talked about earlier, we have personnel supporting the Strategic National Stockpile Warehouse where they're conducting medical logistics operations, as well as some test kit assembly personnel. That's been an ongoing mission for pretty close to a year now. We continue to conduct voluntary COVID mapping or contact tracing operations in support of the Vermont Department of Health. And more recently, we've started to administer COVID-19 vaccinations across the state. To date, we've administered over 10,000 vaccines to Vermont citizens in support of the Vermont Department of Health's efforts. Additionally, we have planners who are working with the medical planners from the state and some other planners here within our headquarters who are continuing to support. So very busy time. Our soldiers are doing a great job, as are our airmen and women, and supporting the state and conducting their global missions. So thanks for the opportunity, sir.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. So we'll close out our opening statements here, but one thing I wanted to bring up that's important. It's important to me personally, but it's important to us as an organization, as a military. You've probably seen, and we talked about it before, you've probably seen Facebook posts, open air burn pits, burn pit exposure. Most of those were in the Middle East, and all manner of trash and waste was disposed there. It was all incinerated on both large and small military bases, and I think there are only 9 or 10 of them remaining now. But there's certainly been many more than that over the past 20 years of our involvement in Southwest Asia. And what that does, obviously, is expose U.S. and allied service members to all manner of harmful toxins. If I look historically, the past several years, we've lost members to really odd cancers, aggressive, mysterious cancers, and they may have been caused by the burn pits. I think about people like Brigadier General Mike Heston and Sergeant Major Mike Cram, both personal friends of mine, who died far too early suffering from these diseases. And I can name a dozen more off the top of my head, folks that I deployed with, both in Vermont and outside of Vermont, that have died from these unusual, aberrant diseases. But in an effort to provide more information to our veterans and their families about the risks that are associated with burn pits, I worked with the Vermont legislature, along with some other folks, June Heston being key among them, And we worked with the legislature to pass a bill that requires medical providers to educate patients on the risks, and as well as to increase awareness of the burn pit registry that's located on the Veteran Affairs website. I was charged, and the Vermont National Guard was charged, to work with all interested agencies in ensuring we encourage members, veterans, who potentially could have been exposed to burn pits to register. So it's stated on the website, the registry helps the VA better understand whether long-term health conditions may be related to exposure to burn pits. So listen, if you think you may have been exposed, if you know somebody who's been deployed and may have been exposed, if you've been exposed, register. If you know somebody, encourage them to register. We really need to grow the numbers. We've done well. I think we're a little north of 700 registrants in Vermont, which is almost double where we were 2 years ago. We've had thousands of members deployed to areas with burn pits, and my concern is when they depart the service through retirement or their expiration of their term of service, we lose track of them. So it's important that we get that message out to folks. Go in and register. And as an aside, it's also important if you're going to seek treatment with your primary care provider. What I did is I signed a medical release so that information goes to the VA. Because I don't know what's going to happen in 10 or 12 or 20 years. Anyways, you can follow the link we posted in the comments section. And again, take a few minutes to register if you're eligible. And let's go to questions. I don't want to take up too much of our time here. So question for Colonel Shevchik. Do you have any ETA on when a more accurate noise study will be done for the Burlington area?
So as planned, NGB has funded a noise study, a follow-on one for the area. I expect that to be happening later this season. I do expect delays, quite honestly, based upon COVID. But as outlined in the EIS and the mitigation plan, we have followed up with NGB. They are planning it. They have funded it. They are going to do one. And I would expect that sometime later on in this fall season to winter timeframe. And as soon as we get those results, we are committed to sharing those with the community.
All right, thank you. So next question, are any of our deployed or soon to be deployed servicemen or women in the vicinity of burn pits? And if so, what measures are being made to ensure they're not exposed? So that I know of, the areas that we're going, I don't believe they have burn pits. I'll have to confirm that. I do know from a previous couple of deployments, our Charlie Aviation, our medical evacuation company, when they go into theater, they receive a briefing up front and they enroll in the burn pit registry if they are in fact going to be exposed to potential burn pits. But that's a great question. I will follow up on that one. Our public affairs folks will make a note and we'll see if we can respond to you. So thanks for asking that one. Then what else do we have? Bear with us. We're working on some questions coming in. I think we had some come in via the QR code that we're asking in advance. How do you explain ordering the 115 decibel F-35 training takeoffs at landings in Burlington in view of the hundreds of people reporting severe pain, injury, and distress?
I'll take that one, sir. Well, we definitely we do what we can to mitigate. As we've said before, we understand we are members of the community. We live and around and serve the community. And we want to be as respectful as we can of the community and continue to be good stewards. And part of that is mitigating in any way possible that we can. So we continue to mitigate noise as much as possible. As an example, today was a nice day, so we try to fly when we return to base. We land at the highest possible pattern, and we do one pattern of full stop. So we don't do our training here locally. We try to do as much off station as possible, because we do realize the impact of the community, and we want to minimize that as much as possible. However, we also have an obligation and responsibility meeting these federal mission training requirements. So it is the airport. We have been charged with this mission. We do have to take off and land from it. So as such, we try to minimize that impact as much as we possibly can. We've even raised our traffic pattern. We've changed our traffic pattern. So we are doing anything and everything that we can to be good stewards of the community, and we're committed to continue doing that.
So, and something else that's probably worth mentioning here, I've been working with the Congressional Delegation on securing funding for noise mitigation measures, and I know you've probably been hearing some of the same things via the FAA. I don't know if you have any further details on that. Right now, it's in the initial stages. I have to follow up with the Congressional Delegation, but it's at their level, and that's working with the Airport Authority and then obviously with the FAA to see if we can help out in that way.
Absolutely, and we always have had, and we continue to have a great partnership with our Burlington Airport team, and through their programs to help, whatever we can do to support them and their endeavors and initiatives to make sure that we can help, mitigate noise in the communities from their side of the house through their programs.
Excellent. Thanks, Caesar.
Absolutely.
So, General Knight, you pledged when first elected as Adjutant General that as part of your culture change efforts, you'd meet with every woman in the Guard. How has that effort played out? Also, when do you or did you stand for re-election if lawmakers haven't held the election yet? Will you seek another term? So, a short story, yes, I did. I think we've got a lot of change going on in this organization, positive change. I'm not going to let anything or actions of any one person derail that. My opinion, it's subjective because it's my opinion, but I think we've driven more change in this organization in 2 years than I've seen in a very long time. Now, for the as to the meeting with every woman in the organization, I've been pretty diligent in getting out and going to both the Air and Army National Guard units, whether it's a deployment send-off, whether it's having small unit meetings, whatever it is. Am I keeping tabs? Have I met with every woman? I can't say that I have, but I can tell you I've made every effort to get out, as I said I would, and have some time and honest, candid conversation with some of the junior members of the organization, inclusive of women. So I'm sure that over the past 2 years, I've certainly met or spoken with a majority. And if anybody wants to meet with me, they can certainly let me know, and I'll make time to do that. But thanks for the question. What's the plan for unit family gatherings connecting to military families is essential for soldiers and family on the home front? You want to talk about that one, Dave?
Sure. If I can take a look at the question to make sure I'm understanding it right.
Yeah. What's the plan for unit family gatherings connecting to military families is essential for soldiers and family on the home front?
Sure. We'll continue to follow the state guidance that's out there for gatherings in terms of limitations, in terms of who can gather with or without having been vaccinated. And as the deployments progress, we anticipate that with the progress made with vaccinations, and as the state continues to loosen up its guidance for gatherings, that we'll have more opportunities for families to gather together to support each other, to get the information that they need while their soldiers are deployed.
Yeah, and that's another function of our family readiness groups. And I think, again, as we get on the backside of COVID, we're going to see more in-person gatherings. But right now, we're all obviously living in Zoom or Teams purgatory, which is, sometimes it's actually wearing pretty thin. So valid point, and we'll keep tabs on that, but it's important. Absolutely agree with you. Are you listening to any complaints that are coming in regarding the noise from the F-35s? And do you want to engage more with the community about this topic? The short answer is yes.
Absolutely, and the complaints, I appreciate that question because we do, our public affairs team takes every complaint. And in fact, we get that personally roll up every week. At the end of every week, our public affairs teams does a nice job of sending that. So yes, even as the wing commander, I look at them directly. I get them every week. I know, while I don't always have the opportunity to speak to everyone who has a complaint or a compliment. The public affairs team does an exceptional job at doing that. We do look at the data. And yes, absolutely, just like General Knight said, we do want to engage more with the community. We try to do to the max extent possible. Sometimes we do it directly, sometimes we do it through our public affairs team, but that is an ongoing effort, community engagement. It's something that I don't think we can ever do enough of, quite frankly. But that's a challenge, and it has been a challenge over the past year in the environment. But we're committed to still connecting, whether it be a phone or Zoom like we have through these times, and hopefully in person here in the near future.
All right. Thanks, Caesar. So I'd like to know what the plan is for Staff Sergeant Daniel Blodgett. So again, as I said up front, I find that conduct abhorrent. So that particular incident with Sergeant Blodgett will be going through our adjudication process through our Judge Advocate General. That roughly parallels the civil process. It can happen one of two ways. And again, our JAG is here. We can probably provide some points of clarification as to the process. Sometimes I have to make a hard decision in this job. I can expedite a discharge and send somebody out under what we call general under honorable conditions. We can do that without a board action. Normally that doesn't come with a reduction in rank. Or, provided the survivor of an incident like this is willing to participate, it's a longer road, we can take a board action that would send somebody out of the military in instances like this under other than honorable or dishonorable, and that comes with a reduction in rank. So those are the things that I have to consider. But we're looking at that. I'm going to work with my JAG team, and then we'll go from there. But thanks for the question. Can those living with the National Guard member get their vaccine through the National Guard? So as a non-dependent or a non-spouse. So right now, as I understand it, and maybe we've got some clarifying information that's specific to dependents.
So my understanding is the critical component to be classified as a dependent who is eligible to receive the vaccination is they must be enrolled in DEERS. So that would be a spouse or a dependent who is a dependent child and is 18 years or older, which is a requirement for the vaccine.
Yeah, so really the bottom line here is they have to be enrolled in the Defense Eligibility Enrollment Reporting System, or DEERS. If they're in that system, then yes, they can receive the vaccine. I'm going to stand by here for another question. Do recruiters from Air Guard and Army Guard hold job fairs on base with tours? So, good question, and anybody knows I'm pretty focused on recruiting. This is something we've been speaking about when you and I have spoken about it several times. A lot of opportunity in the Guard. Hard for us to showcase what we do and how we do it and the opportunities because of COVID and the restrictions that we're dealing with. So I believe that there are ways we can work around that. Probably mitigate some of the timeline and having to wait. If folks are interested, we'll try to work something out. Just reach out to our public affairs team and they'll get it to my staff. And we'll see if we can figure out something small scale that actually works within the risk mitigation measures. Because I think that's important. That's really a great question. Job fairs, absolutely. We'll see what we can do. But thanks for asking.
Sir, if I could add something to that.
Go
So
ahead.
one of the greater opportunities that we've seen with interested individuals who may have an interest in whether it's a specific unit or a specific career field, there's an opportunity through a recruiter to schedule time to attend a drill weekend, whether it's an hour or longer, whatever the time available is. So you can see what that unit does, you can see what the soldiers or airmen or women working in that career field do, and you have an opportunity to visit with personnel in the unit, talk to them, get a feel for the unit itself. So if a job fair isn't in the very near future and you have an interest, certainly reach out to a recruiter and you can schedule some time to attend a drill weekend.
Absolutely, sir. If I could add something, I think in a lot of ways it's provided the opportunity in an environment where it's more intimate and more personal. So referrals is always one of our best ways on the Army and the Air side is professionals bringing in and recommending other professionals and then coming on board and getting a small intimate tour within the COVID guidelines, which we can still do because we were able to still grow. Generate growth is one of our priorities, and we were able to grow by 6% last year during a global pandemic, which is an exceptional testament, to the recruiting retention team and the wing as a whole. And the Army's doing the same thing on their side. So in a lot of ways, I think we can take advantage of this opportunity and make it more personal. And you can, like you said, spending time on drill. That's the best way to kind of get a feel for the culture, the climate, and the job.
And then actually, thank you. And by the way, that question reminds me of something else when we talk about opportunities. And I briefed the Vermont Commission on Women. I briefed the Vermont National Guard Caucus and the Women's Caucus. I've certainly briefed our Congressional delegation. Some of you out there may not know, but the Vermont National Guard is the first National Guard state to open a battalion-sized unit, a combat arms unit, to the recruitment of women. Historically, combat arms has been closed to women, and that changed about 4.5 years ago. But with that change, yes, you can now enlist, but you have to meet these requirements. It starts with a climate survey. You have to have women leaders in the organization, meet certain training requirements. All told, optimally, that would take a year. So here we are. Not only, I found out today actually, not only are we the first state to have a battalion-sized combat arms unit open to the recruitment of women, that's our CAV squadron. We just opened our infantry battalion. Less one company. We've got one company. Once we get that company trained and in place and we get approval from National Guard Bureau, we'll have the entire infantry brigade combat team open to recruiting women into infantry, cavalry, and armor positions. So there can only be one first. I'm pretty proud of those units for doing that. That's their focus. That was their initiative. So hats off to their leadership for doing that. But that grows opportunities for women in this organization, the Army National Guard, by 2/3. So that's pretty profound to me. Since North Macedonia has been admitted to NATO, has Vermont's partnership with North Macedonia changed, or will it change in the future? How will Vermont National Guard and North Macedonia train, coordinate, or otherwise collaborate over the next year or 2 years? So it won't. It's changing in its focus. We've been alongside Macedonia for. This is going into our 27th year, I believe. So certainly 26 years. We were one of the early members of the state partnership program. And through this, we've grown with North Macedonia. Non-commissioned officer development, range training, small unit tactics, domestic operations. We touch a little bit of everything. So now the focus is going to change into helping them build into an interoperable force with our NATO allies. So it could be changing their force structure to a light infantry brigade team or light infantry brigade group, which is focused on what the NATO mission requires. So that's where we are with them right now. In fact, I hope to be traveling here at the end of May to Krivolak training area. The Macedonians are going to be participating in an operation, a large-scale exercise with Bulgaria and Greece. And we'll have some observers on the ground there for that. So as we start to get on the backside of COVID here in the U.S. and in the Balkans, we'll be able to increase those opportunities and get back on track with that relationship. So the other thing I would tell you before I get another question here, when it comes to those state partnership programs, Vermont remains extremely busy. We probably have, I would argue, one of the busiest two partnerships. So we're also partnered with Senegal in Northwest Africa. And between the two countries, we'll probably do in the ballpark of 15 or 20 events there, pre-COVID, obviously, every year. So it's been very, very productive for us. So the next question is, how often do we use afterburners? Well, we don't. That's the simple answer, but I'll let you talk to the science behind afterburner, no afterburner.
No, sir, that's spot on. It doesn't get any simpler than that. We don't use afterburner. Since we've had the jets in the fall of 2019, there's been one reported afterburner use. We do keep track, and we don't use it. We don't need to use it. And as part of, I mentioned earlier, our mitigation measures of trying to be good stewards of the community, it's not required for my weight and balance, what we call like takeoff landing data configuration. It's not a requirement. So that's why we use military power. So we don't use afterburner. And it is even logged. We keep track. If it was to be used, I know about it, and we'll certainly be transparent about it and share it. And we are still at the same number that we have been now for the past better part of 18 months, which is one.
So not to take away from time for questions, but I'm not a pilot, obviously. What drives the need for afterburner, and why is it different here than in other F-35 locations?
So great question, sir. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a lot of it in the weight and balance of the aircraft. Is what is the weight of the aircraft? What's on the aircraft? What's the length of the runway? What's the temperature? What's the altitude? What's the density? There's all these things that go into that, and we have the opportunity to not use afterburner. Could we? Sure. But we choose not to, again, to be good stewards. That's one of our mitigation measures.
All right. Thanks, Caesar.
Yes, sir.
So I had another question on why we send soldiers on commercial flights to their their mobilization sites, especially with the risk of COVID. And General Freddie, if you would talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So really what it boils down to, it's the size of the unit deploying. We have a threshold we have to meet in order to use contract air or chartered aircraft. Another alternative is military aircraft if they are available. So we recently had a unit deploy, small unit, a little over 30 personnel who deployed in January. And unfortunately, due to timing, first off, that unit did not meet the threshold to be able to award a contract for charter air. We could not access military air at the time. It was just before the inauguration, and if you recall, there were a lot of National Guard forces flowing into Washington, D.C. in support of the inauguration, and therefore military air simply wasn't available. So therefore, we had to use the only option available to us, which is civilian aircraft flying down to the port of debarkation down in Texas. So not our ideal solution, but the only one that was available to us in January.
Okay, and the other piece of this, and it's really hard for us to track. We talked about it a little bit earlier today. We don't know where those soldiers contracted it. It could be the commercial flight, but we've had some instances. While we in Vermont are very stringent with our risk mitigation, I look at what the wing has done with 2 major training exercises, sending 200 plus airmen to do two different out-of-state air bases, and one of them being in Florida with Tyndall.
Florida and Wisconsin.
Florida is a very red state when it comes to COVID, and we had no instances of COVID coming back. And that's something we do when folks come back. It's important you understand. We test when they go, we test when they come back. That's all part of it. Risk mitigation, they work as a unit, as Vermonters. So we protect them there. The challenge sometimes is when our members go to different training locations. I don't know what the gaining state does, whether they abide by the same risk mitigation strategy that we have here. So that's been brought up. I've certainly brought that up to National Guard Bureau and to our first Army counterparts who help us with training and collective training and validating us for those mobilization tasks. But okay.
Sir, if I could add something there, just I think it's important to highlight that is we've taken I would say, a more conservative approach than some. There's a little bit of leeway and latitude in here, and part of that I think is, again, we talk about doing right by our team members and our family members, and we know that people during this time are accepting a risk to go on a TDY or a deployment or go somewhere and come back. And so part of that is we feel like we owe that to the team and the family members is, we owe them a test or we owe them certain circumstances and things to do. And that's above and beyond what might be the DOD requirement or what is the DOD requirement. But we feel that that's prudent to do, and it's paid off. And the other thing is we continue to do surveillance testing. So every week right now, Tuesdays and Thursdays at the wing, that's offered. That's for family members as well. So you can come in, and we have family members who take advantage of that to get tested, and hopefully as things start to get better here and we get into the spring and people want to travel, they have that comfort level where they can get tested before and after, because I know people do want to travel, but they want to do it safely and smartly.
Excellent. So the Air National Guard has poisoned the soil and groundwater beneath the airport and the ecology of the Winooski River, and thus our drinking water supply, with the class of forever poisons known collectively as PFAS. That's PFAS, PFOA. When is the Air National Guard and Air Force going to address this unmitigated environmental and public health disaster? So we talked about it a little bit earlier. See if you wanted to address that.
We did, sir. Absolutely. I mean, this is a national level issue. This is not unique to right here in Burlington. It's not unique to Vermont. It's a concern I think that all of us have. But what we want to reassure folks with is that we are committed to the health and safety of our members and our communities and our neighbors. And we are in a process right now. We've worked extensively with the environmental manager and the environmental team, where our next process is going to be a remedial investigation. So we're waiting for that process to go through. We are going through it with other states throughout the country. it's frankly not going to be on a fast timeline. And I think that's what's difficult for all of us to kind of get our arms around is it's not necessarily the response time that we want. But again, we're committed to doing the right thing and to the health and safety of our neighbors. We've tested our drinking water. Our drinking water is safe. They just recently tested it again a couple weeks ago, our public health team. So again, we're committed to doing the right things and making sure that we stay on top of this. Our environmental team does an exceptional job on that. We meet frequently on it, so we will certainly provide updates as we get them, because it's gonna be an ongoing effort.
Yeah.
And do you still use the phone?
We don't, sir, and that's the thing. I appreciate you asking that question. So part of that is left over, as folks may or may not know, like firefighting foam. That was one of the contaminants. And there are others that happen throughout the country, but that's probably the most well known. And so there's residual left. And so even though it's not used anymore and hasn't been used for years, there's still this resolution that again we're committed to. But we're going to follow the environmental experts, and we're committed to that process.
All right, thanks, Caesar. How is the Vermont Army National Guard going to transition to the new ACFT, the Army Combat Fitness Test? And how will many M-Day soldiers, or traditional Guard members, be held accountable to meet the standards? That's a tough question. It's a different standard. It's a different type of training to prepare for the Army Combat Fitness Test. It's a different focus. It focuses more on the core. It's more time intensive. So that's important for our commanders and our first sergeants, those command teams, to have to schedule training with a very limited training schedule. It's still not fielded. Some units, we haven't done it yet. I think we have done some rehearsals with it maybe.
So we have some units who have been leaning forward and have conducted some training on the separate events, and we even have some units who've done some diagnostic Army Combat Fitness tests. But the bottom line is the Army will be implementing the 4 record Army Combat Fitness test, and I believe it's March of 2022. Between now and then, units will work towards getting their instructors trained to administer the test, to get soldiers trained on how to train for the different events. One of the most recent, what's the word I'm looking for, the changes made to the ACFT is one of the more challenging events has been the NETUC. And the Army just announced within the past week that as an alternate to the NETUC, individuals can choose to do a plank, and there's a sliding scale for that event as well. So the Army's encouraging everyone to take the test. Our units are scheduling those tests between now and when it goes live to orient soldiers to the new test, and our administrators need to get the data into the training system so that the Army can continue to collate the data from across the Army to include the Army National Guard, Army Reserve, and Active Army. And as that data gets collected, we expect that on an annual basis we'll see the standards evolve over time as the Army becomes more aware of how soldiers are performing with the test. So bottom line is March 2022 is the go-live date for the ACFT. Between now and then, we'll learn as an organization how to train for it and how to administer the test.
Thanks, Dave. Here's what I know. For those of you not familiar with the current Army Physical Fitness Test, it's push-ups, sit-ups, run. And it's based on age and gender. And the ACFT differs from that. So I've done the Army Combat Fitness Test, at least I practiced it, and yeah, it takes some training. It's hard. It's just different. And it doesn't help that I'm old, but it was hard. Well, loved ones need to quarantine when they return from deployment. Well, our hope is if Vermont continues on its current track, we hope the majority of our folks will be vaccinated, and that won't have to be the case. But the short answer is I don't know at this juncture. That's a great question. That's something else for us to follow up on. We certainly don't want our members to come back from a deployment and then have to quarantine for 10 days or 14 days before they can see their loved ones. So thank you for asking that.
Sir, if I could add just one thing on that is, like you mentioned, there are some locations on the air side, I can't speak to the Army, where the deployed locations we're in constant communication with our deployed members, and some of them are actually getting vaccinated in theater, but it's kind of on a case by case, location by location basis. So, obviously, if they don't get it in theater, we will certainly offer them the opportunity when they get home.
Sure. If I could speak to that, to the Army side of that. So, we are attempting to try and get as many of our soldiers fully vaccinated before they arrive at the mobilization station. Our early mobilizers who left in January did not necessarily have that luxury because we were just getting the vaccines provided by the Department of Defense into the state at that point in time. So some of those soldiers, again, to remind everyone, it's a voluntary vaccination right now for the Department of Defense, and will remain so until the vaccines are fully approved by the FDA, I suspect. For the first units arriving in theater, over 80% of those units who arrived in CENTCOM and in European Command were fully vaccinated when they got there. I sat in on a teleconference last Friday where we heard from the Forces Command Surgeon that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is being pushed forward to our units who are deployed overseas. So we know that it's out there and available to them. We also know that on the way back, when soldiers arrive at Mob Station to demobilize and come home, they will be tested, and they'll have plenty of opportunity to be tested multiple times before they arrive back here in the state. So again, based on state guidance, that will really drive whether they need to quarantine or not. But based on vaccinations, based on what they do at mobilization station, we anticipate our soldiers coming back in very good shape.
Outstanding. And obviously, the end state of all this is we want to protect not just our members, but their families as well. So that's important for us. So the F-35 is reported to cost between $35,000 and $44,000 per hour to operate. How do any of you sleep at night knowing how much operation of this aircraft detracts from public spending on programs that can actually help people?
I'll take that one, sir.
Okay.
I understand the cost is a concern, but right now our responsibility and what we're charged with is we have a responsibility and obligation. We've been entrusted with this federal mission that plays a pivotal role in our national security. We take great pride in the fact that we were selected for this. And I think you see that from the wing with the way their performance and how we stay on track on timeline. So that's our charge, that's our focus, is to make sure that we are a ready F-35 fighter wing. And while I understand and appreciate the concerns on cost, our focus is on the mission and that we've been entrusted with, because those are the decisions that we're not involved in, and we stay focused on what we have been directed to do, which is the mission.
All right. What is the Vermont Guard doing for Sexual Assault Awareness Month? So we've got a number of events that come up through April. You can contact the Public Affairs Office. And I just want to recognize both the Air and Army National Guard teams that work in that field. This really started last year with an event that Nikki Sorrell and Christina Lozelle came up with, and they called Not Just April. And it was a week-long series of events, inclusive of town halls, guest speakers, really putting the focus on sexual assault and prevention. And thank you for bringing that up, because when it comes to the topic of prevention, some things that you should probably understand we're working on. I've been asked to be on a General Officer Advisory Council with National Guard Bureau, working in two different areas. One is the prevention of suicide, and the other one is prevention of sexual harassment and sexual assault. That is less about me. It's more about the innovation, creativity, and drive of our soldiers and airmen working in this field to drive change and work on prevention. I just get to be the voice of it. The benefit for me, I get to advocate. And one of the things that I've asked National Guard Bureau to look into is create a pilot program in Vermont for a violence prevention integrator. So the Air Force, the active duty Air Force, uses it. Right now we have our sexual assault response coordinator who is responsible for both prevention and response, and that it doesn't work. And that also kind of ties into the violence piece of it. One of the more underreported crimes that we have, and I know this from my experience in law enforcement, and I also know because I was raised in this environment, is that of domestic abuse. Again, we'd like people to come forward. I'm going to put things in place, lasting, sustainable change, whether that's a violence prevention integrator or whatever we can get to change the focus to prevention. But again, use those apps, and if there's information out there, we can address it. The other thing that we're going to do for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is you'll see it. There'll be a series of videos coming out on social media, so you can look forward to those as well. We'd like to know why the National Guard is being sent to do a detail that would normally be handled by full-time Army in Africa. You want to address that one, Dave?
Sure. So our soldiers who are deploying in support of 1st and 2nd Infantry out of Connecticut to the U.S. AFRICOM mission in the Horn of Africa are fulfilling a mission that has been in place for many years. And for many years, it's been fulfilled by Army National Guard units from other states throughout the country, as well as active component. But what's really important to know here is when you look at our uniform, it says U.S. Army. It doesn't say National Guard. So we, as an operational reserve for the Army and within the National Guard, are training every day to fulfill our federal mission. And that means that we can fulfill any mission in any combatant command theater of operation throughout the world. And this mission in AFRICOM is one of those missions. So if you look at the active duty, they're spread very thin across the country, across the world, and they can't do what this country needs them to do without the support of the Army National Guard. And so it's for those reasons that our soldiers and our units are heading over to AFRICOM.
Thanks, Dave. I think it's really important to remember, many years ago when I first started my career in the Guard, we were a strategic reserve, and that has certainly changed in the past 20 years. We've become a very operational reserve, and again, it's because of that operational tempo. We're in a very dynamic global environment and have been for a number of years. And the Guard, to me, is we've validated that we're as good, and in some instances, it's a subjective assessment, certainly as good, if not better, than some of our active duty counterparts. Not that it's a competition, but we're good at what we do. And that's, again, that drives the demand. And the saying is, we're always ready, we're always there. If you look at our COVID response, while simultaneously preparing for deployment, and really the thing to remember is we are, both as an Air and Army National Guard, we are the primary combat reserve of the Air Force and the Army. Okay, can activated Guard members take online college courses for free? Well, I know that folks can take college courses while deployed because I've seen it. It works. They can use their federal tuition assistance. And what I don't know is if they're on Title X orders, if they can use our state entitlement. I owe you a follow-up on that. That changes the dynamic a little bit because they're in a federal status. Even though they belong to us, they are under a different command authority.
They are still National Guards. Men and women will have to look at the statute to see.
Yeah, look at the statute, and we'll get our attorneys to look at that, and our educational services officer. But yeah, we'll make a note of that for the public affairs folks, and we'll get back to you. But good question, thank you. Regarding F-35 flights, I live in Winooski, at the top of the hill. It's not a problem as they take only seconds to lift off or land, but could they schedule around the trains that pass by daily within feet of residences to include senior centers?
So
how do you schedule?
So I appreciate that question. So scheduling, it's a balancing right now of we have to do what meets our training requirements, and a lot of that is based upon do we have to do day flights or night flights? When is the airspace available? And we also try to create a regular, predictable, and stable schedule. And we try to be transparent about that too for the community. But at the same time, we also have to balance that with operational security. So I think as people kind of have learned, we take off roughly about the same time in the morning between 9 or 10, and then same time in the afternoon roughly between kind of 1 and 2 o'clock. For night weeks, it's a little bit different, but we try to get that out through our public affairs team. So again, we try to provide regular stability so people know kind of roughly when the takeoffs and landings are going to be. And again, that's dictated by the training requirements, the airspace, the weather, and whatnot as well. So there's a lot that goes into it. Unfortunately, we can't deconflict with the train schedule, but that's kind of a little bit about how the schedule works and why it works the way it does.
All right, thanks, Caesar. How does someone get a civilian job working for the Guard as a contract employee? So, contractors are folks that work for private companies that come in and work for the Guard under a contract or a subcontractor, and we have a lot of that going on, military construction primarily. I'm going to guess your question is probably more focused on employment with the Guard as a technician. There are a number of ways to get hired into the Guard. One is by being a member of the Guard. You can compete for an active Guard and Reserve job, which parallels active duty, same pay scale. Or you can come to work as what we call a dual status technician. Again, dual status meaning it requires Guard membership. So you are in uniform during the week, but you're a federal technician on a federal technician pay scale. But you get paid for drill weekends, where an active Guard member is, in essence, a salaried employee. And then there's Title V employees, which are civilian members of the National Guard who work under Title V. So they are kind of our continuity here, our civilian counterparts. They may be in the Guard, but they don't have to wear a uniform during the week. And again, technicians have unique technician skill sets. They're very niche, personnel, logistics, maintenance, but there's a lot of opportunities in the Guard. But I encourage you to certainly look at it. And you can reach out to our public affairs office. They can get you in touch with folks that can kind of walk you through the process if that was something that you're interested in.
So if I could add one more area of opportunity for civilian employment with the Guard, and that's through the state military department. It's a state agency that supports the National Guard, both Air and Army, with personnel here at Camp Johnson, personnel over at the Air Base, and throughout the state. And there are other entities within the state military department. I'd encourage you to take a look at the state military department's webpage and see what's out there for opportunities.
Thanks, Dave. And that actually, reminds me it's really important to understand it takes a lot of folks to make this organization work, and the folks I think that are behind the scenes making that happen in a lot of instances are the state employees of the military department. So thanks for what you do. If you look at our building, the alternate care facility in over in Essex, they were central to that. Running the wires, the plumbing, getting the contracts in place, streamlining the process so we never went without material. So, yeah, a lot of opportunities. Okay, we got the last question here. We got about 3 minutes left. If you're working for the Guard in an additional specialty, like the Honor Guard, and you get activated, does the Guard hold that job for you when you return like a civilian employers are required to do? What do you think?
So, if it's a permanent position, the answer is yes. If it's a temporary position, and by that I mean on additional duty orders, such as ADOS, whose acronym, the name for the acronym is escaping me at the moment.
Active duty for operational support.
Thank you. I don't believe that we can hold that position because those positions are subject to funds available. And so typically if someone deploys, it's going to cross fiscal years, and the funding that's in place to support that position may not be available when the individual returns. I'll tell you, I can't answer from a USERA perspective what that means, but I don't believe that we have to or can necessarily hold that position.
I don't know that we can, but it's a great question. Again, subject to funding. So, okay, we're going to wrap up for tonight. Again, we'll try to get back on track with these. It's been a while since we've done one. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it. I appreciate anybody listening this evening. Appreciate your attention and your engagement. I appreciate the questions. What I'd like to leave you with is, again, if you're a veteran, you've been deployed to a location where you have potentially been exposed to burn pits, go to the burn pit registry and register. If you're listening and you are watching and you know somebody who's a veteran who hasn't registered, please encourage them to do so. And if they've got any questions, they can certainly reach out. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, I know we got a lot of questions we probably didn't get to tonight. Our public affairs team will do our best to answer all of them. And if I owe you anything, if I don't get back to you in a day or two, please prompt the public affairs team. We'll make sure that we do. So thanks again for listening. Appreciate what you do for us. Be safe, and God bless. Take care.